Alrighty, Biology 30s. We've got one more video here on our Hardy-Weinberg Population Note Guide 2. So last video we talked about the 5 conditions or assumptions or criteria for Hardy-Weinberg, and understanding Hardy-Weinberg is a model and it is used to predict is evolution happening or not. If the genotypes and allele frequencies are staying the same, a population is said to be in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. But if there's a change in the allele or genotype frequencies, the population is evolving. So we went through and we talked about the two equations, the allele frequency and the genotype frequency equation. And now let's do a couple of practice questions. I would recommend that the very first thing you do is to write your formulas out. So again, we've got our allele formula, and that allele formula, P plus Q is equal to 1. And genotype formula, P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared is 1. These, of course, are in your data booklet, but it helps if you write them out. And then just jot yourself a little note. The P is all of the individuals that have the dominant alleles. Q is everybody in the population, the frequency or the proportion that have recessive alleles. And then the genotypes, P squared is the homozygous individuals in the population. The heteros, this term 2PQ is the heterozygous, and Q squared are the homorecessive. So here's an example question. We are told that 15% of squirrels have gray fur. Now that's a recessive phenotype. That is a trait. That's an appearance, what the squirrels look like. So we're asked to find the allelic frequencies. So in other words, find P and Q, and find the genotype frequencies. So what is P squared? What is 2PQ? And what is Q squared? Those are the genotype frequencies. So we have the two different formulas. We've got our allele formulas, and we have our genotype formulas to use. So now, this 15% of squirrels that have gray fur, we talked about that a gray fur squirrel has the two recessive alleles. They are little b, little b. This is a trait, this is a phenotype. So understanding that only for the recessive individuals, the phenotype, the trait, is also the genotype. So we have been given Q squared. This 15% of the population is the Q squared value. These are the individuals that have two recessive alleles, little b squirrels. So Q squared is 15%, and of course, as a decimal, 15 out of 100 is 0.15. Okay, so we have Q squared. Now we're asked to find the allelic frequencies. So we've got to go from Q squared to Q. How are we going to do that? Well, Q squared to Q, we need to take the square root. So if I have Q squared and I take the square root of Q squared, in other words, the square root of 0.15. Oh, by the way, did I tell you need your calculator? All right, grab out your calculator. The square root of 0.15, okay, so punch it into your calculator and you're going to get a value of like 0.38729. Now, don't round yet. We're going to do all of our rounding at the end. Like I said, if this was a written response question, it would tell you how to show your final answer. It might say, express your final answer as a percentage to 1 decimal place, or express your final answer as a decimal place to 2 digits. Okay, just pay attention to what the question is asking. So we've now found Q, right? Q is 0.387. This is my values on the calculator. So from Q, this is all the individuals in my population who have the recessive alleles. So it's the recessive allele frequency. It's the proportion of all the squirrels, either they're homozygous recessive or they're carrying a recessive allele because they're heterozygous, but it's all the squirrels in the population that have that recessive allele. Now we're going to calculate P. That's my other allele. So P is 1 minus Q. This is going to tell us all of the squirrels in this population that have a dominant allele. So these squirrels could be homozygous dominant or they could be heterozygous, but we're looking for the frequency or the proportion of the squirrels that are having the dominant allele. So we just take 1 minus this value on our calculator, 0.387, blah, blah, blah. And on your calculator, you should get a value like 0.6127. That is our p-value. That tells us the frequency of the dominant allele in this population. Okay, so if these frequencies are not changing, the population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. If the frequency of the recessive goes up, then the dominant goes down, we know our population is undergoing evolution. So the next part of the question asked us to find the genotypic frequencies. And for that, we need to use our genotypes formula. So the p-squared term, that's all the homozygous dominant individuals. That's all the squirrels in this population who have 2 dominant alleles. They will be black because they have big B, big B. So we know the p-value. We're just going to take that value on our calculator, 0.6127, whatever all those digits are. Don't round yet. We're going to square that. And what do we end up with on our calculator? Well, we end up with 0.375. So if you're asked to convert to a percentage, you just times it by 100, and you get 37.5%. Or maybe you're just asked to leave it as a decimal. Maybe you're asked to leave it as a value between 0 and 1 to 3 decimal places. Well, that's 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So just depending on what the question is asking you, just follow along with what it asks. Next up, we're going to find all of our genotype frequencies. So the next term in our Hardy-Weinberg genotype formula is to find the heterozygous squirrels. These are all the ones that are black, but they carry the little b, the gray allele. So we've got 2 times the value for p times the value for q. So we're just going to substitute this in now. 2 times, well, we know what p is. We just wrote it down. It's 0.6127, blah, blah, blah. And here's my q value here. I'm going to plug that into my calculator, 0.38729, blah, blah, blah. Punch that into my calculator. 2PQ, all these black squirrels that are heterozygous, is 0.475. Or if I convert that to a percentage, that's 47.5% of the population are heterozygous. They carry a recessive allele, but they're black because they have this big B dominant allele. And finally, the Q-squared value, that was given right here in the question. That's 15%. So the last thing that you have to do is check your work. Make sure that these values add up to 100% if you're using percentages, or if you're using decimals, they're going to add up to 1. Okay, so I'm just going to do it this way instead. Okay, so p squared plus 2pq plus q squared, if you're using decimals, will add up to a value of 1. So what did we say our p squared was? Well, we said it was 0.375. Those are all the black squirrels that have big B, all the homozygous dominant. And then all of the heterozygous squirrels, well, those are still black, but they carry that recessive allele. Well, that was 2PQ, and we said that was 0.475. And finally, all these Q squared, that's what we were given. Those are the gray squirrels. Those are the little b squirrels. They have 2 recessive alleles. We said that was 0.15. That adds up to 1. Again, if you're doing as percentages, it would be like 37.5% plus 47.5%. plus 15%, and that all adds up to 100%. Okay, so either way that you do that, make sure, double check your answer and see if they add up to 100%. Okay, so again, write out your formulas, make sure you're showing all your work, and express your answer as you are told to in the question. So it might say as a percentage to 1 decimal place, it might say 3 decimal places, whatever, just pay attention. So here's another example, and in this example, Sorry, I'm just clicking through. Oh, I wanted to go back. My bad. I'm writing down my two equations. I got my allele frequency equation. P plus Q is 1. Those are the dominant alleles. Everybody with a dominant allele is P. Everyone who has a recessive allele, we call that Q. And then my genotypes, well, I've got these three terms in the equation. Here's my homozygous dominant is P squared. Everyone who has got dominant and a recessive is heterozygous, that's 2PQ, and Q squared, that's my homozygous recessive individuals in my population. So this is an easier question. It's just asking what are the frequencies of the recessive and dominant alleles. Well, let's read what we've been given. We've been given 4% of the population are short. Well, you know this from genetics, and just to clarify for you, short is a recessive trait. It's a recessive phenotype. It's an appearance, what something looks like. It's physical characteristic. Phenotype, physical. So the 4% that are short, those are the homozygous recessive individuals. To be a short pea plant, you have to have two recessive alleles. You have to have a recessive genotype. So Q squared is 4%. As a decimal, 4 out of 100 is 0.04. So now we're asked to find the recessive and dominant alleles. So we just found Q squared as we did previously. Now you find Q by taking a square root, and then from there you can find P by using your allele formula. P plus Q is 1. Okay, so Q squared is 0.04. The root of that, so the root of Q squared is going to give us Q, and the root of 0.04 is 0.2. Okay, so use your calculator if you don't believe me, and Q is 0.2. That means every pea plant who has got a recessive allele, the frequency in this population is 20%. So 20% or 0.2 of the population have a recessive allele. So what is P? How many individuals, not individuals, what is the frequency in the population of the dominant allele? Well, we're just going to go P is 1 minus Q. 1 minus 0.20 is going to give me 0.80. So 80% of the population have dominant alleles. That means they could be, this is a short pea plant, so maybe they are big T. That's going to give me a tall pea plant, or maybe they're big T, little t. So when you have a big T allele, that gives you the dominant allele frequency. Okay, then the next part of the question is to do the genotypic frequencies. So the homozygous recessive, well, that was given in the question. That's Q squared, and we said that's 4%. The heterozygous, you go back up to your genotype equation, the heterozygous, that's all the 2PQ individuals. So 2 times, what was P? We said that was 0.80 times Q, that is 0.20. Math it out on your calculator, and you should get a value of 0.32 or 32%. And finally, all the homozygous dominants, that's big T individuals in this pea plant population. Okay, so my homozygous recessive, those are little t, those are the short pea plants. Those are the only ones who had a different genotype. Big T, little t, heterozygous, and big T, these guys both are going to be tall. Why? Because they have a big T. So my homozygous dominant, I go to my equation, and that is the P squared individuals. So P is 0.80, so 0.80 squared on my calculator is 0.64. So 64% of the population is homozygous dominant, big T. 32 or 0.32% of the population has got a dominant and a recessive. They are heterozygous. And finally, the short little guys in my pea plant population is 4%. Make sure you double check. Your p squared plus 2pq plus q squared should add up to 1. These percentages should add up to 100%. Okay, next video we'll go through some practice problems. All right, that's it for this one.